You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 367, Building Luxury Homes and a Business from the Ground Up with Brad Leavitt. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I am looking forward to you meeting our guest, Brad Leavitt. Brad is the founder and president of AFT Construction, also known as A Finer Touch Construction, a high-end custom home building company based in Scottsdale, Arizona, known for its high-quality craftsmanship and innovative design. With a background as an electrician, Leavitt transitioned into construction, founding AFT in 2013. The company is now a leader in the industry, recognized for its exceptional residential and commercial projects throughout the greater Phoenix area. Leavitt has built AFT Construction around people-centered approach, emphasizing team development, low turnover, and a strong company culture that he believes is essential for long-term success. We will be definitely diving into those last few topics with Brad today around company culture, how he grew his business from the ground up. We're also going to talk about how he seems to be everywhere all at once and how that has impacted the growth of his business. We're going to dive into major pain points of building his company, the necessities of having a visionary, a process guy, and implementers in your company, what a day in the life of a luxury home builder looks like. We're pulling back the curtains and asking Brad all the questions. We asked him about his best delegation practices. We also found out that Brad does not have an executive assistant. And so we definitely had conversations around why, how does that work? How does he manage his schedule? Why did he make that choice for himself? And then we also are going to leave you with some parting wisdom from Brad for struggling entrepreneurs. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to take my Next Level Business Owner quiz. In 3 quick, short minutes, you can find out what's most holding you back from taking your business to the next level. Then you'll get a curated playlist of the podcast with specific episodes that address those specific challenges. In those episodes, you will find advice and strategies that you can implement in your business right away. Take 3 short minutes and head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome, Brad. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amber. I'm very excited.
Yeah, this has been a long time in the making.
It has been. I know. It's been something we've been meaning to do for a while now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should just give a shout out to Luann that you and I met at Luann's conference in, November of 2023.
Correct. Yeah,
That's
little ways
crazy.
back.
Yeah, and then we got to reconnect at High Point with Luann, of course. So that's how we know each other. But as I got to know you, the couple times that we met, I was just so intrigued with your entrepreneurial journey. And it's really inspiring what you have achieved. And so I thought my listeners could learn a lot about the challenges and how you built your company to where it's at now. And then I don't want to close off until we find out, well, where are you going next in the business and what are the plans for that?
Yeah.
So let's just jump off. And I would love for you to start out with share with us a little bit about your company. What is the structure of it now, where it stands? And then we'll go backwards in how you got to where you're at now.
Sure. Yeah. So currently, we're roughly 30 employees. We do not, we're a general contractor that specializes, we do commercial, but most people know us for luxury, high-end residential construction. We work in the Phoenix metropolitan area. We're based in Scottsdale, but we work all over greater Phoenix area, and we build homes that range from 4 or 5,000 square feet up to 35,000 square feet. We could go bigger, but to date, that's probably the biggest we've built. And homes range from, as I mentioned, luxury product to building sites, net zero, which is where the homes produce as much energy as they consume. So from a sustainability aspect, we've been fortunate to work on some incredible projects and work with some amazing designers and architects. And we've grown a lot. Like many companies, we do not self-perform the work, so we subcontract all the work. And the reason we do that is because each project in the portfolio we do is so diverse that it's in scope and size and traditional versus modern. There's so many variables that it allows us to handle a bit more by subcontracting that work.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I said where we were going, which is the beginning, but all I can hear is like how important relationships must be to be able to deliver the service that you're promising your clients, to be able to have all of those subcontractors to perform at the level and quality that you require.
Yeah, to your point, Amber, it's so hard. It's a relationship industry, right? And
Yeah.
you and I built a friendship. I think there's a lot of value to building relationships with peers inside and outside the industry. But as far as construction itself, like there's no way we would perform without our trade partners. There's no way without that relationship that we could hit the level of quality and timeline and schedule that we need to for our clients. And I'll just be open. It's I'm dealing with something that just came up last week for the first time. And I'm pretty open. I think most people know me. I'm very, very transparent. We had a trusted trade partner that we've worked with a long time that does not has communicated with me great for many years, that we've known this person. All of a sudden I get a letter from their attorney last week that they filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And they're right in the midst of doing projects. And so as you think about this, just mitigating risk as a general contractor, like, those relationships become very important, because now I'm dealing with a couple projects that had this vendor on it that now, thankfully, we have other relationships and peers and trade partners that are willing to step in and help us
Get it to the finish line.
Yeah, get in the finish line and get these projects finished. So to your point, those relationships become very key, not just as things are going well, but sometimes in crisis moments.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's take it back to, the beginning of AFT. So how did it become, the company, and where were you at in your life that you decided, yeah, I'm going to become a general contractor and I'm going to go on this journey?
Amber, it's a great question. I think maybe I have to preface with this. It's something that I've experienced personally, and I've learned speaking with so many entrepreneurs, is I think entrepreneurs or business owners come from two ways. One, they're either naturally opportunistic, they're natural entrepreneurs, right? They don't really have fear of, going out on their own. So there's some people that are just born to do it.
Yeah, they had lemonade stands when they were kids, right? Like, and mowing lawns and doing all the things.
Selling candy at school, whatever, for a low markup. And then some are forced into it, right? And it's funny as you look back, because you bring up the lemonade stands. I think it's funny because as a kid, I found myself doing that. I would buy candy and I'd sell it, and have, little things to earn a little bit of money. I'd eat my profits, I think, in most cases, which is not beneficial. But
hopefully you're running business different now, but
but outside of that, I didn't really see myself as an entrepreneur. I just did. And to be fair, my grandfather was. My grandfather retired from the Navy. He started an electrical company in San Diego. He had that mindset. But immediately my father worked for the same company for like 35 years.
Yeah.
Which is pretty rare. And so my dad was very conservative as far as, call it, he was a very hard worker, very disciplined, but very committed to the company, very committed to where he worked. He enjoyed that stable. And so, I came from a mindset that stability doesn't align with entrepreneurship. And so to take that stable approach, I never viewed myself as going the entrepreneurship route, especially early on in my career.
Yeah. So your dad was a little risk adverse, and we an agreement that being an entrepreneur is incredibly risky,
Yeah, I mean,
or can be.
I think in most cases it is, because
Yeah.
when's the right time? I don't know. Have I saved enough? I mean, fast forward to now, a lot of people reach out and contractors reach out. Hey, Brad, when's the right time? And when is the right time? Like,
Right.
when is enough money? It's kind of like, you see, parents looking at maybe adding a child to their family. Like, well, when's the right time? I don't,
Right. There's
there's
always going to be a reason it's not the right time.
yeah, and I think with business, there's always a reason why it's not the right time. There's always a reason why the market's not right, or you don't have enough savings, or maybe not
Mhm.
enough contacts, or you don't have enough, documentation, from understanding all the steps of the process. But the reality is, going back to my journey, I mean, uh, I had just lived through a very painful housing crisis, recession in Phoenix, which was
Mhm.
extremely painful. I mean,
Mhm.
I still have a lot of PTSD from that
I
2007, 8, 9,
I could imagine. I was in real estate back then too, and so I felt it as well. I actually quit my corporate in 2010, and I wrote out the recession, but there was like pay cuts, and they wanted you to work way more than you ever did before because they had laid off a bunch of people. And talking about not the right time, I had just got married in 2009, and I quit. Like, I had just had my son and quit. So, like, don't take advice from me, or maybe even you. Like, when's the right time? Every time's the right time, because we both chose probably not the best if you were looking for that perfect timing, but it's worked out, right? Nobody
Yeah.
would say, "Let me get married, let me buy a house, let me have a kid, and this is the time to go start a business."
Yeah, that's a whole different realm there, Amber, to do all that at once. Like, you're a very brave soul, I can give you that. So, but yeah, it's interesting. So I was kind of in this point where I was, scarred, to the building industry and construction.
Yeah.
That's all I'd known. I did that in, studied construction management in college. I worked in the trades growing up, worked for, 5 years at the time out of college. And I was actually pivoting my career. I was actually going to go into healthcare, into finance. And
Mm.
I took the GMAT. I was planning on getting my MBA and go back to grad school, and I was going to completely change industries. And this goes back to call it, that forced entrepreneurship. There were some life circumstances that happened personally that put me in a position where, although I had been admitted to grad school to get my MBA and taken the GMAT, all the steps have been taken.
Yeah.
2 weeks before school started, that opportunity, seemed
Slipped
to
away.
have, slipped away, unfortunately, but ended up being the best thing. And so, kicking and screaming maybe a little bit, it's like, okay, well, what
Yeah.
do I do? I think, we had to start AFT, a Finer Test Construction. And so that's why I say the entrepreneurship, maybe deep down, that's part of me. It's funny looking back now as I skip ahead, though, that now I only see myself as an entrepreneur, right? And
100%. Like, everyone I've ever met that knows you talks about the business owner that you are, and the entrepreneur, and the systems and the processes and the team you built. And so, man, like, the stars aligned. I know it didn't feel like that in the moment. I most certainly like can understand that, but I think you ended up exactly where you were meant to be.
yeah, I do appreciate that, Amber. I mean, the funny thing is you look at I like to look at athletics a lot. I think there's a lot of correlation between
Mhm.
athletics and business and just mindset and,
Yeah.
the hours you put in and so forth. And so, low hanging fruit. I mean, you have Tom Brady, right? Who didn't, a lot of people didn't think much of him, but he was willing to do things other people weren't, right? He's willing to
Yeah.
work hard and perfect his craft per se. And what I found myself is, being in a position where I didn't know if contractors could make money. I didn't know if I could be successful. And for many years, I'm like, I don't know how people make money in this business. And
It's
so,
so risky. Not to speak over you, but
no,
like, when I
please.
look at your business model, there is so much risk on your end.
Yeah, and to your point, Amber, I mean, there's so much risk and there's so much unknown. Like, entrepreneurship in itself is unknown.
Yeah.
Just trying to understand all the risks that you're going to deal with and financial crisis that may come. But when you're a fee business and you're dealing with product and manufacturing and install and hand applied product in most cases, and maybe a limited trade base and maybe a limited skill base. And just like I gave the example of something I'm dealing with now with a trade partner that goes out of business unannounced, right? A deposit's out there. We got to figure that out. There's all the things you just don't know what you don't know. And, and so really what happened, early in my career, starting the business, I realized that if I wanted to be successful at AFT, and I'm in too deep now, I started the company, I have employees, I have a family, there's no turning back. Like I'm all in. So if I'm all in, how can I consume the most information? How could I network? How could I, reach out to my community inside and outside the industry? How can I learn how to build company culture? How can I learn to keep retention, of my team and staff? How can I put systems in place so that we can communicate better with, the end user and our client? And you start, figuring out budgets and accounting and communication and company culture and, all the things that go into running a successful business. And, I look at myself now, I'm consumed with small business. I'm consumed with learning as much as I can. I have a podcast myself, as you know, Amber, and, meeting professionals such as yourself and understanding how you run your business, how you're profitable, how you built your network. There's application for what you do to me and vice versa. And so that's something that I spend a lot of time for sure. And, speaking and thought leadership and networking because it's become so valuable.
Yeah. When your business first started taking off, were you clear about where you wanted to go? Like, did you envision what it looks like today?
I would say, in fairness, I don't know. I would say yes to an extent because, and I'll give an example that when I started AFT, and just a quick background, when I graduated construction management in 2005, I wanted to do luxury homes. As an electrician and low voltage, growing up in San Diego, I worked in Coronado and Rancho Santa Fe and La Jolla and these beautiful homes, and I loved it. The problem is when you're a young 25-year-old kid coming out of college, 24-year-old kid, no one's hiring you to do, a $10 million home. It's just not the case. You have to learn.
Yeah.
And so I did production homes for a year, which was great because I learned how to, manage a lot of people. I learned how to manage 10, 15 homes at once. So that complexity side, even though maybe the value wasn't, the cost of the home wasn't high or the luxury finishes weren't as high, but I kind of learned the process, if you will.
The foundations, just like athletes, going back to the basics.
Yeah, if you can't schedule, you can't succeed in our field. So that part was very good. And then I was able to work at this really high-end resort in Paradise Valley. And there's high-end residential, there's high-end commercial, they're intertwined. And so the experience was great. So the point being is when I started AFT, I had 5 years experience working on one of the most premier projects in town, right? On some of the most high-end custom homes that live at the resort full time. But I knew that as a new company, people aren't just going to hire you, Amber, because you had experience at your prior company. You have to start building your own name and brand. You have to understand pricing. I had to get bonding, right? Insurance, all the things that go with as you walk up, that mountain and try to, escalate to the next level. But the point being, to answer your question, is that I always knew that I knew what that peak looked like. I knew what that mountaintop looked like. And it looked like the product I'm doing today. And I knew I would get there. I wasn't sure how though. But one thing I did know, and I never took marketing ever in college. I wish I did looking back, but I feel like I could, at this time, social media was starting, Instagram started becoming popular. You saw I was early on in Instagram. And I could go on that platform and I could see people who were marketing their business properly, things that stuck out and just that attention to detail or how things looked or how you presented it. And so I knew very clearly how I wanted to market AFT. And the point being, a good example is very early on, I am doing, a kitchen, I'm doing a powder bathroom, a deck, any project I could get. And for a client, we did a backsplash. It was a really small backsplash. And the client is like, you should be advertising this on Instagram that you'll do that you should do a backsplash. And in my head, I'm thinking, there's no chance.
I don't want more of this.
Yeah. I don't want someone calling me for a backsplash. I want them to call me to build this ground up custom. And so I was always marketing not where I was, but where I would be or what I could do. And so I always had that vision. And then it's like, okay, at the time, I may not have a ground up new build, but I could show this beautiful kitchen or this backsplash. I could show the thought leadership, the communication, the systems, the thought leadership, the site cleanliness. I mean, I could, showcase the pain points and how we're solving those as a builder to attract the eye of the customer that leads to the next one and the next one, the next one. So to your point, I did always envision getting to where we are now is just a little bit of a process to get there, as we built over time.
Yeah. So something that I had learned in one of our conversations was that you actually have all your employees take social media videos. Like everyone is contributing to the account. Can you just expand on that a bit? Because it's so unique. When you follow you on Instagram, you're like, is Brad everywhere all the time, everywhere? And if somebody doesn't know that that's like a request that you have, I thought that was such a great strategy.
Yeah, there's two parts to that. And, I think, just again, going back to the entrepreneurship side, the most successful entrepreneurs I've met have a mentality of abundance and not scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is I don't have non-compete clauses for employees that work with me. I feel that we have such a unique brand that AFT is separate. So people are always, and I'm confident enough in our brand and our product and our communication delivery and everything that people aren't you, Amber, right? They're not me. And so that's the separator. And so if people come and go, I'm not going to penalize them, right? For being part of AFT, even though that construction is a low barrier for entry and it's easy to start your own company. So it's easy for people to come and learn the AFT way and then go off on their own. But the reality, we've been working to build this brand. So that's one aspect of it, right? And so how that plays into your comment here is that I've always been a big proponent that I have a lot of people that have built personal brands through AFT. And you'll see that. You'll see, Megan at AFT Construction and Ryan at AFT Construction and Paul at AFT Construction and Ken and Spencer. And so many employees, all my employees have AFT Construction, handle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty unique to have, 30 employees and they all believe in the brand enough to rename their personal Instagram or create a new one to push content. And again, it's funny. It's one of those things. This goes back to the company culture is I don't require them and I don't make this mandatory, but they want to be part of the culture and brand because we have such a unique group text chain and there's so much camaraderie and we do a lot of cross training between departments and in the field that it's a way for them to connect with others. And so as we have people added to the team, they want to be part of that and they start creating content, which then helps the parent brand, which is mine. I can reshare their content. And a lot of people that follow them they have their own drones. They fly. We have one of them that, they're certified drone pilots now. And
that's awesome.
And so it's been amazing how they've built kind of their own brand within the AFT brand. And many of them, of course, there's some of them that have opportunities that are very unique and depart, but most of our team, they're here to stay. They believe in the brand and they don't leave. And it's up to me to make sure I have a pipeline for them to stay.
Yeah. So as you were building your company up to this point, what would you say some of your major pain points were that you literally overcame by working harder, knowledge, having mentors, all of the things that you were saying about, asking questions, how can I do X? What were those pain points that you, other than marketing that we just talked about, but other than that, what came up for you?
I think first and foremost, you mentioned this early on as the processes. I didn't realize how important processes are for so many reasons. And I'll give one easy example. I hired, there was actually, call it my mentor, my boss out of college that trained me. Phenomenal. Phenomenal superintendent, phenomenal project manager, great communicator, knows the craft. And so I'm finally in a position financially where I can make this hire and I bring this person in. And they lasted a month and we're gone. And the reason being is because it's this mindset of, custom's different than production, kick them off the pier, hope they swim. There was no protocol. There was no SOP. There's no procedures. And so this person became very frustrated working for AFT because we didn't have any systems or protocol. And so they're used to coming from a streamline of information and how they handle things. And all of a sudden they have no idea where to start, and they're just like, this isn't for me. I'm out.
I have heard that happen over and over. So I just want to highlight that for our listeners that you might be losing star team members because the environment isn't supporting the way that they can show up their best.
Couldn't agree more. And so if you have an environment, because really employees, if you want to look at the companies with excellent company culture, it's two things. One, they have to believe in the brand, right? We kind of touched on that with them
Yeah.
believing in the product and creating their own Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of it. The second thing is they have to know what makes them accountable. How can they perform? How can they get to the next level? Or even at minimum, how can they be accountable? How can they perform on a daily basis when they show up?
Like, what is expected of them? Like, clearly.
Right. Are they double
Yeah.
dipping? Like if Amber and I are working together and we're so much crossover, we don't know where that baton's handed off. It makes it very difficult. And so if you can solve those two things, you're going to have retention. Now, what does retention mean? Well, retention means that the employees get better and better after every project. Year by year, they get better and better, and so that means your product, your service is going to get better for that client every 6 months, every year. You're going to continue to escalate and be better. The biggest thing is training, right? How much money do we spend in training and hiring and interviewing, and how much downtime do you have as a company, right? And so by having good retention, now you can focus on marketing, on financials, solving issues that you've had in the past to make sure you don't have those again. And so, Luann always talks about autopsies and doing these job audits and stuff. And so now you're focusing on audits to make the future better, but you're not worried about spending time in interviewing and hiring. And so solving that means you're going to keep good people, which means the brand will excel and grow so much faster.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm curious, are you the process guy or you just say we need processes?
I'm really glad you asked that. That's a great question, Amber. I am not the process guy. I'm the visionary. And again, going back to entrepreneurship, you have to understand, are you a process or a visionary? And so there's two, and you need both. You need both hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so for those that know AFT, I have Spencer. So Spencer, who's calling my number 2, my director of construction, Spencer's a process guy. I can come to him with the vision because I'm, as a visionary, I know where the company has to go. I mentioned early on that I could see where we were as a company. I could see how to get there. I just had to figure out how.
Right.
And, and so attending conferences and continuing education and networking, and I'm part of a Builder 20 and a mastermind group, and all these things add to that visionary that now I go back and bounce them off of Spencer and Megan and my team. And you need the implementers. And so the implementers are hand in hand, work with the visionaries. So I am the visionary. I have great implementers, and that's really how you find that perfect chemistry.
Yeah. So speaking of being the visionary, and I would love to know what a day in the life of Brad is being a business owner. Like, what are your key responsibilities? It sounded like a lot of leadership and inspiring and all of that, but like actual details. What's a day in the life for Brad?
Actual details. And it evolves, but I'll talk about today. It's a lot different when you're an early entrepreneur because you're wearing all the hats. That's not the case now. I have 30 employees. Delegation, right, is really key. So you look at a day like today, I'm in charge of our business development. And so as business development, right, there's a lot of elements to that. There's not only build-in relationships with my design community, so design, architecture, because they're getting leads too. They have clients coming in. So for example, I met with an architect that I've been chasing for a long time, and they do some incredible work around the country, and they're right here in my backyard. Well, funnily enough, because I've been marketing net zero and ICF, which is insulated concrete form. That's where the walls are built out of styrofoam and concrete. So it's like a Yeti cooler. We have done this work before. And so this architect's like, hey, Brad, I have a client that follows you on YouTube, that follows your website, has seen your Instagram. And they've actually personally requested, we're in the backyard. So I'm there meeting, understanding their process, how they do the design. I'm teaching them about ours. And here we are putting together a preliminary budget after our meeting that we just had that I'll turn in on Friday and sit down with the client and hopefully get that job. So you have that element of business development where you're building this rapport with the design community. Again, another meeting I had this morning is I have a new client that we've already been working on pre-con. And so we're going through that final bid and working through those final numbers. Again, I have an estimating team that's doing that, but I'm there, face to face with the client, negotiating and working through those final details of the contract. Again, so outside, the marketing aspect, personally, I go to the gym. I had a health scare a year and a half ago. And so for me, it's, I'm making sure at the gym regularly. So I make time for the gym and exercise. I think if I can be healthy, then I know my team can count on that, right? looking at, right now it's January, what's today, the 13th, I
14.
think, 14th. And so, I just, wrapping up year in financial. So like every quarter, you know, of course we're going through it every month, but every quarter we're forecasting how we're looking for the year based on budgets and volume and our targets, and working with my CPA and my financial consultants to make sure we're tracking. Right now, I'm looking specifically at year end and strategy there, on how we're looking for this year and setting budgets for next year. So, financial, business development, admin, marketing, and then the general nuance of, hey, I got a letter for chapter 7. Okay, well, I'm
Right.
not, I'm not,
Little curveball.
yeah, my role in that is, I spoke to a couple of mechanical companies that I've had a relationship with. I spoke to the owners. Here's the predicament. Here's what we're looking. Here's the projects, and get that intro done and get them with my team. And then my team's taking them from there. So there are some dots, and I will be fair. I mean, the reality is, Amber, when you're signing the front of people's checks, they answer differently. And what I mean by that is sometimes, even though we have good relationships, we have trade partners that aren't performing. Whether they're overbooked, they miscalculated, they have other GCs, they have other timelines, crews left, crews are sick. I mean, all kinds of stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so my team will call me and be like, hey, Brad, they'll always go up the chain of command, but eventually it'll get to Spencer. And if they're not having luck, then I get on and it's like, hey, Brad, we're having an issue with this vendor. And so it's up to me to call that vendor and make us, provide a solution. So I think a normal day in the life is, schedule the podcast I'm doing, meeting with clients, meeting with architects, just making sure that our pipeline, again, I have backlog for 2025, 2026, 2027. So not only curating that backlog, but making sure that we're adding to it and that we're in constant communication with what we have in the pipeline currently.
Yeah. So even though your position has changed, you still wear quite a few different hats. So one of the conversations we had, I remember you saying that you schedule everything. We kind of geeked out about that, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you, what are some of your best practices to be running a team of 30 and having so many unknowns? It sounds like if there's a challenge, it ran up, like that can't be scheduled. The chapter 7 was not scheduled. How do you manage your time with all of the different responsibilities?
Well, again, Amber, I'm obsessed about my calendar. Anyone that knows me knows I'm obsessed about it. Live religiously through my calendar. And so maybe that goes back to college, being, having my first daughter in college, working full-time, taking full-time credits. And so learning how to balance, fatherhood, college, and supporting the family, taught me some valuable things that I use now. But, from a schedule, like I mentioned, we work in Metro Phoenix. So for example, Thursday, I'll be in North Scottsdale, which is, 60 minutes from where I am right now. I mean, we could be an hour and 10 minutes between projects. And so understanding where I'm at and what side of town is very important to me on what day of the week. That's why if you were to call me and say, hey, let's play golf tomorrow, I'm pretty much going to say that's not an option, but let's look at 4 weeks from now. I mean, I have scheduled things out through June, right? I mean, on a big level, but the reality is, everything goes on my calendar. So that way I know where I'm at, whether it's kids events, whether it's work events, whether it's personal things. But I think what's really important that I've learned, Amber, is I used to be really bad about booking myself the whole day, 30 minutes, every 30 minutes you're on the entire day. What I've realized now is that I have to have gaps in there. And not
I'm
just
so glad you just said that.
Yeah. And because the reality is I've learned that it's not just to recharge and recenter, but things come up, fires do come up, and to be able to have the flexibility where you can pivot. And so I find myself, again, this goes back to scheduling. When I was early on doing the business development, everyone would reach out. Let's have coffee. Let's meet. Let's have it,
Yeah.
And so you take those meetings. Now I don't take them as much unless it's very targeted. It's very minimal. Your time becomes a lot more sacred. And so the meetings and commitments I have are going to be beneficial to the company and to us individually. And so that allows windows there where I have that flexibility if something does come up.
Yeah. Do you have an assistant that helps you with your schedule or that is helpful in gatekeeping?
When I was driving to the studio here to talk to you, I have a client that called me who we just built their house and we're looking at doing a new joint venture project with them. And he said, Brad, I'm going to have my assistant call yours. I'm like, I don't have one. He's like, what? He's like, Brad, I've known you forever. Like, this is not possible. I'm like, no, I don't have one. I need to get one. So to answer your question, Amber, I don't. I feel I can, I can task pretty well. Like, I'm a very organized
Yeah.
person. So to this point, I'm kind of a mad scientist, I think, in a way, how I run my schedule. And so I don't even
Right.
know how I can train someone. I don't even know I have the confidence. And again, keep in mind, I'm not a micromanager. Like, I delegate
Yeah.
everything. You could ask my team, I delegated everything. With this specifically, I don't know how I could.
So that's so interesting because, again, we've only had a couple times that we've met, and I would have thought you were the mastermind behind processes because we talked about your schedule and
Yeah.
how much you get done. And so, how do you reconcile being the visionary, which most people think is just like really just thinking out there, maybe a little chaotic, but you're also, it sounds like your personality balances the structure and the schedule, right? Like, is that something you learned? Because it served you? Like, was it a skill set, time management, something you learned, or do you feel like you just naturally had that along with the visionary personality trait?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's more natural. I mean, naturally, I'm more, I'm definitely, again, I'm not, I believe in systems, even though I'm not writing the systems. Like,
Yep.
there's a reason I'm not an attorney reading documents all day. Like, it's just not my forte, right?
Yeah.
But the point being is that even though I'm a visionary, I think there's a fine line between a creative and a visionary, right? And so creative is someone that needs that time where they can create, where they can, if they're an interior designer or, and they're in marketing and they're creating logos. I mean, whatever it is, like they need this really creative. And a lot of times creative people aren't maybe that A type, again, we're generalizing here, but I mean, there's these kind of checks and balances we all have, strengths and weaknesses. For me, I'm not so much a creative as far as when it comes to design and stuff, but I can see where the company's going, but practically I can build it. Like, I can build things in my mind and I can build my schedule and I can, interpret that and then understand how to delegate to people that are actually going to write the format and write the SOP.
Oh my gosh, did you just hear him say, I build my schedule? That is so, like, literally, that's how you see the world. You're like in the perfect profession. And so you're looking at time as something you get to build and make work efficient and effectively, just like your homes, I'm sure.
It is. And so to me, my value, and really what it comes down to, I think people value different things. And I've always been a value of time. So to me, time's the biggest value. And those that know me, again, it's funny. We build some of this luxurious product, right? And I can appreciate fine product, whatever it is, fine handbags, right? Fine clothing, fine, vehicles, houses. I mean, all these things. To me, that doesn't drive me. To me, it's time. And so understanding, again, going back to the construction analogy, like, I build schedules, I build time. Like, that's what excites me. And then how does that incorporate into my company? How does those efficiencies, bleed all throughout each organization?
Absolutely. All right. So it sounds like you are a pro delegator, but that is a challenge for many business owners, delegation. I would love to learn some best practices or advice that you have around delegating. Honestly, when we first opened it up and you're talking about all of your trade partners, I'm like, how does he trust them all? Like, you have a very clear brand and a promise to your client. And so even delegating to them, but your team, like, how do you delegate to them to get the results you're looking for?
Okay. There's a few parts of the delegation. And so where it's really tough is you speak to these business coaches, right? And these business execs, and they're like, hey, Amber, if one of your employees can perform 60% of your capability, that should be handed off. And you're like, 60%? Like, that's not even close to 90. Like, what are we talking about? So there's an element to understanding that delegation side, but I think more importantly, there has to be systems in place for great delegation. And what I mean by that is that, for us, to put a superintendent on an island to build this custom home, even if they're experienced, like, you're not setting them up for success. So you can delegate that responsibility and train them and give them an SOP about, here's how you operate, each aspect of the communication channel with the client, and here's your job role and everything. But that crossover training is important. And so we do field walks, right? We have production meetings in the field where I'm bringing all my superintendents to someone else's project. So Amber, if you're one of my superintendents and we're at strap and shear, we're at a point in the framing process that we're going for an inspection so we can start, plumbing and electrical, mechanical,
Yeah.
the whole company's going to be them. We're going to walk it. And
That's some extreme accountability.
Extreme accountability. And so that accountability is key because, one, we're not coming to your project to criticize you. You become snowblind looking at the same thing. There's things that are missed. So having 10 sets of eyes come out and look at things that you may or may not know. And so what ends up happening is, these audits, these production meetings we have every month, these on-site trainings, right? That collaboration is really important because that allows you to delegate more effectively because you do have systems in place where I don't want to say a catch-all, but it gives people an opportunity to hopefully not be going blind. So these mistakes don't get, exponentially larger that end up costing your company a lot more.
Absolutely. And when you're delegating and you don't get the results you're looking for, what is your leadership style?
Well, let me answer one thing to that because this is really important. Delegation is as you're growing, again, when you're the sole entrepreneur, you're involved in everything.
Right.
And it becomes
that's how you got started. We kind of skipped over that, but that's how you got started, right?
I did. I'm in the field as I was a superintendent around projects, and you start hiring and everyone comes to you. Everyone comes to you, Amber, and says, how do you do this? How do you do this? And it's easy to answer that because you know the answer and you've done it. And you know what the company looks like. You know what that communication channel looks like. You know what the core values are of the company. The point being, there has to come a point where as I put Spencer in his role and someone in the field calls me and says, Brad, we have this issue. Brad 1.0, again, without delegation, would just answer that because we get it solved, boom, we move on to the next thing. Brad 2.0 says, Amber, that's a great question. Have you called Spencer about it? Oh, no, I didn't think about that. Okay, call Spencer. And so if you want to be an effective delegator, you have to train people to follow the org chart. You have to train them to go to their superior or their manager or whoever's in that role so that they learn. And that's the only way to have effective delegation is making sure that people get to that point where they train and you have to trust them. Yeah, there's elements to that, which, we've touched on.
Yeah. So I do something very similar and I teach that as well. So if you don't have a Spencer and you do need to be the one answering it, can you like resist that knee-jerk reaction as you did to answer it and say, how do you think we should solve this? What are the solutions? Like, it's so easy for them to want to just put the ball in your court. And I'm like, put it back. Come back when you have some options. Well, and that builds up their confidence. So they give you a couple options. Great. Which one do you think? And it's either a coachable moment or you're building them up with their confidence because they chose the one you would have chosen. If they didn't choose the option that you would have chosen, now it's a coachable moment. And man, why do we not do that? Time. It would have been so much easier to just give them the answer, but it's long-term thinking. It's long-term investing in that employee that they're going to come to you less and less with questions because they've either built up their confidence or they now do have the answers.
It's really hard to do that. Decisions. But if you can do that, to your point, Amber, if they come to you as you're a small company and be like, what do you think? And ideally train them where they come with one or two or three solutions. It's that cognitive, group think that, they have to get to that point for you to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is next for your big vision in the company? Can you share it? I don't even know, but what do you want to share where you're going next?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been focused on build to suit, which means, a client such as yourself, Amber, would call us. You have a lot, we build your house, and it's perfect. And ideally it goes great. And in 5 years, you call us back when you're ready for the next one, right? So every project that we built, for the most part to date has had a client on the other side. So the way we built our systems are much different than doing investment projects because there's an end user, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of systems that have to take place, which is great because it's allowed us to perform, I don't want to say needy client, but, a high performing client that it has a high expectation that we have to deliver on.
Mm-hmm.
So now 2.0 for AFT is we're looking at development. So we have some unique projects. In fact, the client that called me today, I was mentioning that's like, you don't have an executive assistant. We're looking at doing some development projects coming up, which is another arm of AFT. So it's going to be a great opportunity because the one thing we're lacking is because of the social media we've been fortunate to build is a lot of people reach out. Hey, Brad, we love the product. We love the build. Do you have a house available? And we never do because they're all spoken for by another client. So having product in our queue where clients can be like, yeah, I want an AFT house. Well, here you go. We have a couple under construction. Here you go. And so, utilizing the brand we built to now have a different product out there for other customers.
Absolutely. Because what is the time frame on a typical project for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say on average, it's 3 to 5 years. And the point being is that on minimum, pre-construction is a year. Like you're typically at least a year from that first phone call till you have a permit in hand.
Yeah.
Some cases 2 years, some cases 2.5 years. So it's a long window. And then most builds are at least a year and a half to 2 years. And I have some that are 3-year builds because of the size and complexity of the house. So, 2 years of, pre-construction, 3 years of build, 5 years is a long time to build with a client. Like it's a long relationship.
That is
there.
a long time. Yeah.
It's a very long time.
So then there's so much value in having almost standing inventory. So is it going to be completely build, or is it your goal to have somebody come in mid and be able to finish off finishings and have it like semi-custom?
That's a great question. Again, this goes back to be successful as a business owner, you have to really understand the service you provide and who's your ideal client.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can understand the ideal client and who you're marketing to and build your system around that, you're going to be very successful in any field. Point being is that this goes back to your investment side. The strategy would be, we already have the arm or we have the capability to work with the client. But all to answer that question of, we would prefer to sell it turnkey to a finished user, which means there has to be a commitment from the investor as well that there's risk, right? It's easy halfway through that build, someone comes in, again, you don't have all that cash hanging out there, market could change. Yeah. You have a guaranteed, bird in hand, client right there. But again, the downside is now the project will take longer and you're working through changes and customization for that client, even though you have the security of funds. But when a home's done, if you can weather the storm, call it the risk adverse, that we're talking about, if you can put the money out there, let it sit, there's our carrying costs for sure. But when the house is done, turnkey, it's cleaned, it's finished, it's furnished, and the clients walk in, typically your sales price is higher. So if you have the patience, so our goal from an investment would be turnkey, toothbrush ready, you move in. We already have the build to suit arm, right? And pre-sales would not be a strategy because we want to do something totally different on this angle.
Completely different. All right, excellent. So something else that I learned about you was that you really give back to the community quite a bit. And you have a podcast and you have other things going on. And I'm just curious, why? Like why does that matter to you when time is your most valuable resource? What is it in it for you to be giving back so much to the construction community?
Well, I think there's a few points to that. An early mentor taught me generosity precedes prosperity, right? And so that generosity is always the first part of it, and then opportunities come. And so to answer that, what I've seen, like Luann Live's a good example. Going out there was a big commitment. Luann, doesn't shy around that. You were there, Amber, as a public figure, and you're on high demand for these business owners that want to speak with you and have time with Amber. But the point being is you leave that conference with 300 or 400 people that now become ambassadors of your brand. And so to get your brand and again, not just the selfish side of this, but the companies that are most successful, right, are the ones that have silent salespeople. And a silent salesperson is someone that sells your brand that's not on your payroll. So the more ambassadors and advocates and silent salespeople that are selling your brand locally and nationally elevates your brand. And so for me, it's not just, there is the element to that, a lot of people know AFT. So these designers at some point will want to work with AFT, or they'll have a client move into Scottsdale. I'm in a great location where a lot of people do move around the country. So that's available. But at the same time, there are a lot of mentors that help me get to where I am. And I think repaying that is really important. And furthermore, I go to these conferences and I learn so much from you, Amber, and everyone there that, there's a lot of benefit to me going. And yes, it's a time commitment, but I come back with 3, 4, 5, maybe more nuggets of information and application to my personal business. So I think it's multifaceted from a branding aspect as well as personal branding is permanent job security.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to talk about silent sellers? Funny story. We met before we ever met. So I had a client that was an interior designer, and we had bought property in northern Arizona, and we were going to build. And I say we were going to because we ended up selling it for a profit. We're going somewhere else. Tennessee, here we come.
Wow.
But yeah. So long story short, so my client knew that I had bought property, we were going to build, and they're like, oh, you need to follow Brad and AFT. Like, if you want to know what's going on in Arizona, and if I had all the money in the world, this is where I would go and have him build. And I was like, okay. And I followed, and it was interesting, but I had never met you. And so like, I was aware of you because of the silent seller, right? That had introduced virtually through your Instagram. So full circle, your Instagram's working, your silent sellers, you're meeting people, you cross promote into other industries. That's how we met, was interior design. That's I never shared that with you, but that was the first introduction I had with you. Was as soon as my client heard I was in Arizona, it was like, Brad, you need to look at what Brad's doing.
Well, it is helpful. And I mean, the more you can build that community, right, of advocates, I mean, the more benefit and opportunities it brings, for you. And a lot of it is just like you mentioned, giving back, right? Showcasing site cleanliness, pain points, thought leadership, building science, whatever it is, to educate the client. And the more info we can put out there, the more comfortable our clients are as they move forward with us. So.
Absolutely. Any parting wisdom you have for an entrepreneur that is struggling and is like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? And, how do I get there?
Yeah, I think what's really important is something that I should have done sooner is understand in your industry how you could double down on education, right?
Mm.
A lot of us have gone to college, or you go to college and you take a tremendous amount of debt and risk. And maybe it's a degree that doesn't perform. Maybe it does. I don't know. But the reality is, like, why are you not investing in yourself at this level?
Yeah.
There are a lot of conferences and seminars and people specifically for your industry that you may spend 10 grand, 15 grand. I mean, it's nothing. For us, I mean, in the design community, they have Design Camp. We have the Contractor Coalition Summit. I mean, again, these are small things. So the point being is that chase experience, not money, right? The money will come. Like, if you chase experience and whether it's working with a signature team, whether it's working for a signature client or signature project, or attending that conference that has direct impact on your ability to accelerate your growth, like, that'll pay itself back. And so invest in yourself to understand how to run your business, how to create company culture, how to create systems, because that will all be so beneficial. And it took too long for me to understand that.
Yeah. I was actually recently having a conversation with my husband, and I was like, when did it flip where you're like, because I have a son in high school, flip from I have to go to school to like, you wake up and you're like having your coffee and can't wait to learn something else. Like, my husband and I are always diving into something new, whether it's personal or business or, financials. Like, we're just lifetime learners. We're like, when did that flip? Will it flip for our son before or after college, later in years?
It's so
Because
hard.
there's such a return on it. And it just to me, especially when you're in service based, right? You're providing a service. Every time I level myself up, I'm able to provide a higher level of service to my clients. Mm-hmm. That is what I am selling. So every time I'm investing in myself, I'm investing in the business.
Yeah, it's true. When you invest in yourself, you invest in the business. And I made a comment, that I learned that, connected with, again, this kind of goes back to that entrepreneurship side. Don't pigeonhole yourself, right? I think, we talk about Instagram, but I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, right? Because the demographics different. TikTok, the demographics different. And I know it's work, and who knows what's going to happen with TikTok here in a couple of days, but the reality is LinkedIn's there, Instagram's there, Facebook's there, and the people on it are different. And so, understanding people that have been successful in other fields, again, I say personal branding is permanent job security. That personal branding is built by investing in yourself and your brand and your education and knowledge and business acumen, and it'll lead to other opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brad. If our listeners want to learn more about what you're offering or connect with you on any of these social media channels you shared, how do they find you?
It's pretty easy. AFT stands for a finer touch. So aftconstruction.com. All the handles on all the social media are AFT Construction. They can also search Brad Leavitt. They can look up the Brad Leavitt podcast, Brad Leavitt LinkedIn. I mean, Brad Leavitt website. We're kind of all tied together. So
incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your entrepreneurial journey with us.
thank you.
I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. And I sure hope you found my conversation with Brad to be valuable, but I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on my conversation with Brad, what will you take action on? How can you implement some of the insights that Brad shared about his own entrepreneurial journey, his struggles, how he built his team? I would love to hear more. Share with me your thoughts on today's episode and what you plan to implement or take away from my conversation with Brad. You can DM me on Instagram at Amber_De La Garza. If you are looking for a business coach that can help you with productivity, time management, business systems, leading your team, reducing your stress, then we should talk. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com to find out more about ways to work together and to schedule your discovery call today. Schedule a discovery call to find out if working together is the next right step for you and your business. Again, head on over to amberdelagarza.com. If you are new here, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you've loved today's conversation with Brad, be sure to share it with a fellow business owner. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.